Okay, well, good morning, everybody. Here we are, back at the Mood House once again. And let's turn in your Bible to Genesis 35, and we actually got a new section to read today, verses 16 through 21. And I want to emphasize 21. We don't want to go on to 22. I'm still mulling that one over. So we'll work with verse 22 on a future time. But if someone could read that, or a couple guys, either one, somebody could read Genesis 35, 16 through 21, and then I'll make some comments.
Then they moved on from Bethel, however, still some distance from Ephrath. Rachel began to give birth and had great difficulty, and as she was having great difficulty in childbirth, the midwife said to her, "Don't be afraid, for you have another son." As she breathed her last, for she was dying, she named her son Ben-Oni, but his father named him Benjamin. So Rachel died and was buried on the way to Ephrath, that is Bethlehem. Over her tomb Jacob set up a pillar, and to this day that pillar marks Rachel's tomb. What's the last verse?
21.
Israel moved on again and pitched the tent beyond Migdal Eder.
Okay, Tower of Eder. Okay, good. Thank you, Dick, for reading that. And wow, first reading, boy, a lot happens here that just gets kind of covered over. And we're going to talk about that. Before we do, let's look at review, because it's been 2 weeks since we've been here. So we've been looking at Jacob at Bethel and his second occasion at Bethel, with a separation of probably 25 years in between. He was at Bethel as a young man going out, and now as an older seasoned man coming back into the land of promise via God's calling. So, and we've been comparing, and this was a review from last time. He was going out in chapter 28, the promise, "I will make you fruitful," and the conclusion that we came to is that the context of what that time was in Jacob's life, just like in any young man's life, is he's solidifying his beliefs and his strategy for living, his plans, his goals, his rules that he's going to live under. These are very much part of what first half of life is all about, these types of things. Contrasting that to now in chapter 35, where he's called to return. God had promised that he would bring him back, and now he's returning to that same place. And God gives him the command and or the ability, be fruitful. There we had some fun talking about that. Is it a command or is it an ability, an empowerment? Yes and yes. Be fruitful. And then conclusions. Here, it's not these things, it's these things. It's about receiving grace. It's about gratitude here. It's about the release of control, which is very much, again, about the second half of life. First half, second half. So we've looked at that with the example of Jacob. And now, so the summary, and this is again from last time, God's presence right here throughout life's process. So I've got kind of a little play here. God's presence, life's process created new power. As the life is lived, the experience of God is actually lived out through the man's life. And that is a wonderful truth. And the ultimate picture of that, of course, is the incarnation of Jesus Christ, where God lived through the man. And not only was he the God-man, not suggesting that we are God men, but we do have the indwelling of the Holy Spirit. We're not Jesus, but there is a tremendous amount of correlation there as an example of the God men living out. We are Jesus's hands and feet and eyes and heart to the world that we live in every day. And so as we grow and develop as a man, we learn what that means to live that out. Jacob got it. I would say Jacob got it. He's not perfect, but meaning that he got what life was supposed to teach him. That is, he got what later Jesus demonstrated, and that is descent, death, followed by a resurrection. I think Jacob learned how to let go. And of course, that's my interpretation. But that's how I see it. So let's review. So now moving on, I want to take this section that there's so much going on here. I want to look at these things, and let's do that first of all by what I call a macro observation. What is going on in this short set of verses, 7 verses, at the macro level, at the large level? Well, number one is, the thing that stands out to me is the loss of a man's wife. I don't know if anybody here has experienced that. You have. So you would know more than the rest of us what that would be like. But I would call it great sorrow and great loss. The closest thing that I can come to, I remember Charlie as a very young boy, probably adolescent, going to my grandmother's funeral and watching my grandfather. It was a very moving vision. I have it riveted in my mind to this day. That my grandfather is a strong man. He was a tall man, and he was a strong man. He was a wise man. This is my mom's dad. And very compassionate man. Never saw my grandfather cry. But I remember him at the graveside service just weeping and said, "She's in the ground. She's in the ground. She's in the cold ground." And of course, my aunts, who are his daughters, all huddled around him and hugged him. And he was just so overwhelmed with the grief of the loss of the finality of that moment. The text is I wouldn't call it cruel, but almost disconnected to the emotion of what this time would be like. Remember, Jacob longed for Rachel. Jacob was deceived by his father-in-law and was given Leah. I don't know how all that works. I mean, I gotta believe he loved Leah too. I don't, 2 wives. Why would you want 2 wives? I don't, I don't. She's, but he worked for 7 years for the hand of this woman, and she was the pearl of great price, and he worked for her, and then they lived together, and then she gave birth, and now all of a sudden on this road there's a loss, and the text doesn't go into the. I just think that's so interesting. Why doesn't he talk? And Jacob wept with great sorrow over her grave. He sets up a pillar, and which is great, but I just got to believe there's great loss and great emotion with that. Okay, so that's the first observation, and that's what I saw. Maybe you saw something different, but Jacob died, or Rachel died. The second is, again, the macro observation. In contrast to the great loss, there's now a new life. The birth of Benjamin in Hebrew, son of my right hand. and of course Rachel, her last breath was Benoni, which is son of my sorrow. And then, you know, she left the earth. She left this earth, in a sense, grieving over the giving birth, the son of my sorrow. But then Jacob names him Benjamin. Again, we're going to talk about that. That's more of a micro observation there. But the contrast of great loss to now a new birth, a new life, a new son. And he fills in, you have seen this before, but guys, it's been so long ago, you probably don't remember. But I've been waiting all these months to fill in this last slot right here. Number 12, there he is, Benjamin, son of my right hand, following Joseph. That fills out the family. You know, that's the 12 tribes. Leah over, whoa. Those, you know, I've got this all organized so you can see their birth order, and then which of the four. Jacob had 2 wives and then two handmaids. Again, that's a big question too. Well, there's so many questions. Birth of Benjamin is the second thing. You know, the big macro observation. Then, now the third one, and this is the final one. There's 3 that I see here. Is okay? You got loss and you got life. And I see those as contrast. And there's, the text just keeps moving on. You'd think that either in great loss, there's, hey, let's have a time out here. Which they, you know, it took a while to build a pillar. And then with a birth, let's have a celebration here. But what is so interesting about this is that in the text, it just keeps moving. They keep moving. And here they move. Let's see if I can blow this up a little bit. They're starting at Bethel, and there's a natural road that, well, this is kind of the watershed of the country. This is the high point of the country. The terrain falls off to the Mediterranean this side and then into the Jordan Rift on this side. So this is a natural route here. Bethlehem, Salem, and of course that's Jerusalem. So they go through what was then called Salem, peace, place of peace. Salem is peace, and then finally just south of Jerusalem is Bethlehem. Of course, you know that from the New Testament context. Of course, where Jesus was born, and Bethlehem is Ephrath, which means fruitfulness. The other name is Bethlehem, which is house of bread. So there's the idea of fruitfulness, bread at this location right here, and that's where Rachel dies. But they just keep moving on. So those are the macros, and what I thought would be good is to ask a question. You know, discussion. These 7 verses, as I've already brought out, contain a large swing of human experience. You've got everything from great sorrow, great loss, great pain, to great joy of a new life in the midst of a journey, of moving along. And because the journey would dictate no time out, we have to keep moving. We have daily things that we have to do to keep the ball rolling, which seems almost cruel. Put yourself in Jacob's sandals. What would you be thinking? What would you be feeling on this journey from Bethel to Ephrath? Take out a piece of paper and just write down one word. What would be your primary thought or feeling during this time? And that's how we'll wrap up. If you could just write that down or have it when because we're going to go around. I just would like to hear what you guys have to say. What would be your primary thought or feeling in this time where you've lost your wife, you have a new son, you're in this journey to get home? What would you be thinking? What would you be feeling during this time? And here are the swing. I'll ask you in just a moment. New birth, severe labor mentioned 2 times. There is fear. I can't remember who expressed fear, but it's in the text. Sorrow, the first naming of Benjamin, sorrow. There's a death, Rachel. There's a second naming, Benjamin. There's a burial. There's a continuing of the journey, and there's a pitching of the tent. There's a lot going on. So, Steve, what is your word?
Yes, mixed.
Mixed. I would agree with that. Okay, mixed. Alan, what is your word?
Troubles and travels.
Troubles and travels. You guys sound like you've been there. Jack, what about you?
I would think a sense of loss, more so than the birth. I mean, this is a person you've known for a long time.
Yeah.
Here's a new person you don't really know. So I think the sense of loss would maybe be predominant.
I understand that. Yeah. It seemed like it would really dictate a timeout. Michael, how about you?
Great sorrow.
What's that?
Great sorrow.
Sorrow. So you, like Jack, you'd be thinking about the loss of your wife. Yeah. Yeah. Loss over birth is what not to it's just how we would think about it, how we'd emotionally process it. Dick.
I think just be kind of confused.
Okay.
Confused as to, God, what's happening here?
Okay. Confusion.
All this is happening, and I haven't been able to process it yet. I'm confused.
God, it takes time. Mixed and confusion are probably really very close. Bob V.
I think there's loss and maybe some anger at the same time. Loss in that there's, people that
I would think it doesn't say anger, but I can certainly understand that.
yeah.
Yeah.
But, the anger would be used to put one foot in front of the other and keep going.
Yeah. Yeah. This whole thing of leaving the site and going, moving on. I just thinking about that.
You could also be thinking, well, what was I thinking? As we think of pregnancies these days, I think of doctors prescribing bed rest, don't travel, don't go on an airplane, all this kind of stuff, and yet she's really close to having a baby, and they're just trucking on.
That's a really good observation. Why? Could he have then? I mean, I could very well have blamed myself. For that. Okay, Bob Powell.
I had the same thing that Mike did, deep sorrow.
Yeah.
I hadn't thought of this before, but when you were talking about Jacob's real sorrow in losing his wife, I see that a lot in funeral. The male surviving part of the marriage, grief seems to be more difficult and more severe than the woman.
And
It's an observation. I still see that.
it very well could be because I don't know this, Bob, but it very well, at least from my observation, because males don't process grief very
That's
well.
probably it, yeah.
And it's been so stuffed for so long that when it finally comes out, it's just much more violent, or not violent, but dramatic. Yeah, go ahead, Mr. Jeff.
One word's come to heart.
Oh, you can use two.
Okay.
I use 36.
Life, death, and rebirth.
Well, those are definitely things happening. Yeah. And I think Jeff, what you're hitting on is the idea that all of these happen. You know, it'd be nice to be able to have these things happen linearly, and process it, and then go to the next one. But in our lives, I think we'd all agree that we're carrying these things all the time. There is a sense of grief happening in our lives. There's a sense of joy. There's a sense of needing to move, responsibility. And we don't get the luxury of being able to just focus in on one at a time. I think that's what life teaches us. Yeah. You know, everything doesn't have to be perfect in order for us to, you know, we're just not going to get there. We're just, early years, yes, we think, gee, if everything, one little thing out of line, I get tweaked. No, man, if you're going to live like that, you're going to be one frustrated guy. Stan.
Well, I feel a great sense of loss, and then wonder what's next. You know, what's the next chapter? Where do I go from here?
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me about you, because you are a man of vision. You know, it's just looking what the next step. Stan and Marge are going to move to Greeley. That's cool. Dick.
Well, I'm thinking of an emotional roller coaster, but all the emotions. He's lived quite a few years by this time. He has gratitude. He's great. Had 11 boys.
Yeah.
And then the joy of having the 12th, and then the emotional and the sadness, and losing his life's partner, and so it's just kind of an up and down.
Really
thing
is.
that he's dealing with.
Uh-huh. And not so disconnected. I think we can understand that, because I think our lives are like this. So, and Charlie, what do you think?
I guess the advantage of being last is that you've heard all these good things, but the one I started out with was the letting go factor, losing a wife, and all the joys and sorrows on the way, that just being flexible and time to let go.
Yeah. Wow, time to let go. Boy, he had to go through that, and you've been through that. Maybe some of us still have yet to experience that time to let go, and may God's grace be there at that moment to allow us to let go.
Well, if nothing else, age will do that.
Yeah. All right, guys, thank you for your participation.